invited to Denmark and held big meetings in Copenhagen, and it ended with a big meeting in Kronborg Castle with thousands of people, where the leader, the American pastor Buchmann, expressed the idea that change was needed in social affairs, national affairs, and international affairs, but it all had to be based on a personal change beginning with yourself. The meeting was led by the dean of the Copenhagen Cathedral, Paul Brodersen, and he ended the meeting with a challenge: go home and work out what you have heard here today. 2 years later, Frank Buchmann came back to Copenhagen after a meeting in Visby in Sweden about from revival to revolution. And there he met with Frank Buchmann, with some of the leaders, and here we see Dean Brodersen, we see a Supreme Court lawyer, Valdemar Witt, and a Colonel Hansen. And they were some of the leaders who had carried on for the Oxford Group. And he said to Hunter in Copenhagen, you have thousands of unemployed, what do you do about it? I believe if you are ready to do anything God will say, you may find an answer. Valdemar Witt felt challenged by that and gathered several hundred people. And he had the idea, unemployment is like a big boulder, you cannot move it. But if you cut it up, like the stones you see at the roadside, it can be carried away. At the same time, saying with the thing that unemployment, you have to bring it out to the villages. It is too big an issue for the government to solve. And the movement started with some examples where people went to villages and found work for those who were there. Clergyman with his congregation and a farmer with his neighbors. They told that to the Prime Minister Stauning, and he was moved and said, we must have a committee by leaders of the big organizations to take it on, and I will support it by a statement. But by that time, the war in Europe that has broken out in the end of '39 also came to Denmark, which was occupied on the 9th of April. Here we see German armored cars in the center of Copenhagen. The German Air Force was circling over Copenhagen, and the German had landed troops many places in the land. So at the border there had been a defense, but it was hopeless, and the government had to give in. But their condition was that Denmark should rule its own private things with their own government, and the armed forces should not be interned, but should be at their looking after the material, which should not be given to the Germans. Prime Minister Stauning suggested that the organization to combat unemployment should take special action to prevent that Danish farmers had to go to Germany for work. And moves were made around in this. One move was collecting garbage and give food to the pigs, and collecting wood in the forests and use it for the railways. That became a very big movement and was soon being used by big cars. A Danish artist made this poster where he suggested and showed all the examples where you could improve and make repairs and create work. It was a difficult time in Denmark after the occupation, but it resulted in a nationwide move to find what we could agree about instead of what we disagree about. And meetings were held around by people from different political parties. How can we support what is the real basic values in Denmark? But the Germans continued to make demands at the government, and there were also armed rebellion around the country. And the result was that Germany came with some demands which the caretaker government could not accept. So on the 29th of August in 1943, the government went down. At that time, Germany attacked and interned the officers who were in the garrisons, but the admiral of the Navy aimed in time to reach the ships, and they were all sunk before the Germans took hold of them. Here the ships sunk in Copenhagen harbor. Hitler was furious and demanded that all Danish Jews who were just other Danish citizens in the eyes of the Danes, that they should be collected and taken to German concentration camps. An official who didn't agree let some Danish politicians know. And the result was a nationwide move which actually in time helped most of the Jews getting away from their homes. And by thousands of the other Danes, they were helped to Sweden across the water. But the armed uprising also grew, and the resistance movement became stronger. And at one time, the whole Copenhagen went into a strike and stayed at home because of some German demands. And in the end, the Germans gave up. For the first time, there was a victory. Then came liberation on the 5th of May. And here you see jubilant Danes on the railways. And Montgomery, who had been, Field Marshal Montgomery, who had been leading the Allied forces to liberate Denmark, had a big reception in Copenhagen. Denmark had come through the difficult years with a special way of life preserved. Now we couldn't again enjoy it, but it was also a challenge. The economic development also reached Denmark, which became part of the richer world. What do you do in that situation? Do you just enjoy it? Do you just demand more? Or do you use the better economy also to help others? It is like a big tree. If you cut the roots, the tree will die. The same with the society. If you cut the moral roots, the society will die. But what we actually are doing and have seen here also recently in the big financial crisis is that greed and other moral difficult things have come in and endangers the values that had carried Denmark for generations. We must renew the moral roots. But it is not just in Denmark and today we can do it. Today it is a worldwide situation. We have to do it together with the villages in India and with the farmers in Africa. We have to ensure that all people in the world have good homes, have work, and have good living conditions. That is the challenge, not only to Denmark, but to every Danish citizens. What do we decide? Will we take part in building such a world where all people have freedom and a good life? That is the challenge we have to face.